Hey guys, and welcome to my first single game review video. I've been doing a couple of these review videos lately, and they've mostly been about multiple games and a little bit on the shorter side. So I thought there was no game more fitting for my first true deep dive than a Persona 5 spin-off. And because I'll be streaming Persona 3 Reload soon, which of course you should be subscribing to and hitting the bell button so you don't miss out on those Reload streams, I thought it'd be a good time to get back into the franchise and play Tactica and give you all of my thoughts on it. And I mean, I'm not kidding when I say all of my thoughts. I took notes while I was playing the game so I wouldn't miss out on anything that I wanted to tell you guys about and really kind of analyze every little bit of detail. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I'll be putting timestamps in the video because I'm going to break this review out into like different categories to try and kind of organize my thoughts. And so if you want to see what those different categories are, go ahead and check those timestamps and let's get to it. First, let's start with a surface level discussion of this game and start judging it by its looks and talk about the art. Tactica's overall art direction is really good. Lots of cool visual themes about revolution, and without spoiling, most of the new character and enemy designs are awesome. But for me, the chibi cartoony art style does not mesh well with the tone or vibe with the story it wants to tell. Just look at the arena concept art and tell me that we weren't robbed. The character models from Persona Strikers are right there and still look good. I really don't get why Atlus would choose to go this route, as for me, it genuinely impacted how the story resonated with me on multiple occasions. These chibi characters would do well in a more lighthearted summer adventure style story, with little stakes, ironically more along the lines of Strikers, but it just doesn't do it for me here. Outside of a few animated cutscenes, the story is told in a mostly visual novel format with 2D character sprites. These cutscenes are all really action-packed and all look amazing, but the game shows them with this weird gray bar on the top and bottom of the screen that obstructs like 30% of your view, so you feel like you're missing a lot of the details. It's like unsightly and feels claustrophobic. I really wish there was an option to remove this. But the majority of the game is the visual novel, and while the sprites are really well drawn, every character only gets like 2 or 3 sprite variations, so the visual novel sections don't feel very expressive. And for this cast of characters who are normally far more bombastic in personality, it feels kinda odd to see them so static. And since 70% of the background art is just LeBlanc, I actually lost interest in watching the visual novel segments and would just listen to them while I was doing something else. Also, it isn't a huge deal, but as the school uniform's #1 hater, I need to mention it is lame that their character sprites are of the characters in their uniforms rather than their casual wear. Really, I just prefer all their casual and Phantom Thief looks to the uniform. Now, it goes without saying, but you can't talk about character sprite designs and not mention that Atlus is still reusing the same Persona/Demon JPEGs that are about a decade old at this point. It's time to update them. We give Game Freak shit for it with Pokemon, so I gotta give them shit for it here. These models and drawings are well overdue for a touch-up, and it's pretty glaring in this game since they have their normal appearance in this chibi dimension world. On the positive side, Atlus is well known now for always having a signature, beautiful UI design in an era where it seems most developers are content with using the engine default, out-of-the-box, bland-ass UI screens. And Tactica keeps up Atlus's signature trend. It blends well with the Persona 5 aesthetic, while making some minor touches to be unique in the Persona game lineup. But I will say that Tactica does slip up a bit in the hideout menu UI. It has a few redundancies that can make it a little messy and confusing. For example, both the prep menu and hideout menu have a quest tab, but the prep menu only lets you see what quests exist, and you need to go to the hideout quest tab to actually play them. Why even have this as an option in the prep menu where you can see all the quests available from the menu where you can actually play them? It's a small nitpick to be sure, but I misclicked that bitch like a dozen times while I played, and I needed to get that off my chest. The tabs to equip guns and your sub-personas are also split menus, so you need to bounce between those two instead of just one equipment tab. So it's just a little messy overall, but visually it looks stunning compared to the modern UI. That's enough about the art. We gotta talk about the sound now. And let's just get it out of the way. The soundtrack is a complete banger. Lin and Lotus Juice never miss. Grass grows, birds fly, and the Persona soundtracks are fire. I'm not sure if we can even still give Atlas points for this anymore, but they definitely brought their A game here. My favorite song on the soundtrack has got to be Got Your Tail. Okay, you probably guessed it, but this is the part of the video where I fish for viewer engagement. So why don't you guys go ahead and comment below what your favorite song is on the soundtrack. And while you're down there, maybe drop a like, or click any of those links that you see as you scroll down. Anyway, for as massive as a W as the soundtrack is to this game, I can't let the rest of this absolute disaster that is the audio for this game slide. Because there are some huge audio mixing issues in this game that I can't pinpoint down the reason for, but it isn't good. If you use the default audio settings, the music is going to completely blow out the character dialogues, so I highly recommend making that adjustment to the BGM levels before you start the game. I don't know when the development started on this game. Maybe some of the cast recorded their lines from home and not a studio, but some characters are crystal clear, usually the ones with more prominent voice actors like Makoto, Morgana, Futaba, and Yusuke. But characters like Toshiro, Haru, An, and Arena have dozens of lines that even with tweaked audio levels, you can just barely hear them. I'm not sure if the problem lies with audio engineers mixing the audio in the game, or if it falls on the voice actors for using different recording setups with varying settings and quality, but it is a noticeable distraction, and that is not something I typically notice. So I feel that if it's something I'm picking up on, someone with a better ear for audio, or maybe with better headphones or something, would be driven nuts by it. And speaking of being driven nuts, all of the generic NPCs in this game have a squeaky voice filter that is really annoying. Combined with their, Alice in Wonderland designs, it kind of makes me care less about them, and I sort of tune them all out. But, I wish I could tune out the biggest crime this game commits on the ears, and that is every single move in this game has a voice line attached to it, and it is absurd. In a tactical RPG like this, or like a Fire Emblem, you're going to be constantly making small adjustments to your angles and checking for the most optimal positions multiple times every single turn. So the fact that Futaba has a voice line on every single check, not even just for committed actions, is nearly unplayable to the point I had to mute dialogue audio entirely. It's especially egregious with the triple threat, or your all-out attack mechanic in this game, requiring you to triangulate enemies between the three playable characters' position. So you're going to be readjusting character spots a lot, and they have something to fucking say every time you switch to them too. And forget about if you're checking their spell range. You'll need to hear them calling their persona each and every time too. Futaba will have a voice line every time you take cover and draw a weapon to see what you can hit, even if you don't fire, and every time you get hit. She'll comment on attacks you make that can't miss. She'll comment when you use your persona. The game actually can't even keep up with her voice lines. And if you move through your turn fast enough before it switches to the enemy's turn, the game will actually pause, because she's still behind like 3 "Nice cover! You'll be safe there!" voice lines. Here, listen for yourself what a turn is like in this game.
Target that enemy group! Now
What
go!
to do here? Now it's my turn!
You'll get no mercy! Take him out! Johanna! I got one hit! Nice threat!
Alright.
Nice cover! That's perfect! You'll be safe there!
Better get ready! Now then.
Nice one, Joker! You'll be safe there! Great positioning, Joker! All right, Joker! Nice hiding spot! Great positioning, Joker! Nice position! You'll be well hidden! Nice cover!
Persona!
Nice one, Joker! You'll be
Now's
safe
the
there!
time!
You'll get no
Now.
mercy!
Take that!
Joker's hit the mark! Oh no! Hang in
Now
there!
it's my turn!
I'm ready! This won't miss! Enemy destroyed! Keep it up, Queen!
Okay, I've complained about the sound enough. That's just my biggest issue with the game, and the sound's always playing over gameplay. So let's get a bit more positive and talk about that next. Tactica makes a lot of adjustments to the standard Persona gameplay, the biggest and most obvious being the removal of the elements and the null/weakness effects that comes with them. That's been entirely replaced by ailments in the cover system, which I actually think is quite clever and fits the tactical RPG genre very well. So you don't need to worry about if someone's randomly weak to fire or some shit. You can just focus on the positioning of your characters, which is what all the combat revolves around. There are 3 types of cover that you need to position around. Number 1, not being in cover. This is the core of each fight. Hitting someone not in cover is how you get 1 mors in this game. It immediately knocks the target down, makes them receive additional damage, makes them vulnerable to a triple threat, and so on. Number 2, partial cover. This just buffs the defense. And number 3, full cover, which will block attacks from angles opposite to it and increase your defense. Since this is the same for both player and enemy, your full focus has to be on the map and where everyone is on it. But it makes most spaces on the map pretty bad because you can't consider anything outside of the designated cover spots. This can be kind of clunky sometimes too, because the camera focuses on the player, not an overhead view of the map. And you can't view the map from overhead either, which makes it hard to look around angles, corners, or any spots with verticality. So it forces a lot of trial and error where you need to explore every option and fight with the camera to get a full idea of what you can even do with your turn. You also have free movement on the map, not tile-based movement like in a Fire Emblem style game. So if you try to make a move in between 2 map tiles, the game will adjust your positioning upon bringing up the attack menu to fully place your character on 1 tile, which is very awkward, and it might mess up your aim or break your triple threat angle. Another reason why Futaba's constant chatter is annoying, because the triple threat is your most powerful move, and the game is so sensitive on the angles for it. There's no leeway, and you have to win your fight with the camera for them, and you need to do this because the triple threat is so impactful. Getting back to the ailments I alluded to earlier that replace the element system, some of these are really cool, and some are basically useless. Each affects enemy behavior, which is much better than the standard rock, paper, scissors element interaction, in my opinion. Let's start with Burn, Despair, Dizzy, Frozen, and Forget. These are all kind of useless, I found. Enemies basically just take more damage or won't attack, and these are the most like their RPG counterparts. Shock and Hypno are the best in the game. Hitting someone shocked will immediately grant a 1 more, even if they're in cover, which is really good. And Hypno will pull everyone hit towards the caster, which makes Haru completely broken. Atlas lives in fear of what they created, which is why she has the lowest movement of any character in the game, which is really funny. Sweep and Vortex are pretty interchangeable and knock people around the map, which is still pretty strong. A big utility and feels unique in this genre of game, where normally displacement spells are unbelievably rare. But it mixes up the formula enough to be both memorable and really fun to play around. And these effects and ailments are guaranteed to hit almost every single time you use them, so you get a wide variety of character interactions every time you use them. But SP is limited, so generally combat will focus on guns, and your angles around cover to shoot at targets. If you're brave enough, melee combat has the heavy weapon effect from Fire Emblem Engage, where you push the target back and take their positioning on the map. It's kind of fun to see this minor mechanic from Engage get expanded on, and how Tactica really plays around letting you manipulate enemy movements, which feels really unique for this genre. I haven't played another tactical RPG that lets you do that kind of behavior. And it's really cool, and I think this game functions around it very well. A lot of these abilities are put to good use in the side quest missions, which are essentially all challenge maps with specific clear and specific team requirements to test your versatility with the whole team and their different ailments, and test how you can think through a map. They're all really fun puzzles that I wish we saw more of in the story missions themselves. All of the bonus objectives in the story missions are the exact same. Don't die, and win in X turns, which gets stale super fast. And I really wish they got more creative with these, like requiring you to use an ailment, or something for variety. You do get a level select though to retry for anything you missed, which is awesome and always appreciated. There are a few map tiles besides cover which you can interact with in the game, and they all kinda suck. There are restoration tiles, which heal who is standing on them at the end of the turn. but they basically only show up in the first kingdom, so you'll forget them fast. Then there are switches, which control doors or elevators that match their color, and the puzzles these create on maps are not fun at all. These make you need to constantly switch back and forth between characters, another reason why the constant voiceover is annoying. But because of the camera being pretty finicky, like I talked about earlier, and not giving you an overhead view of the map, it can quickly become hard to plan out your moves when you can't see beyond a closed door, or you can't see to the top of an elevator. So you gotta swap around between the characters just to even get to planning your move for the turn. Top it off with big attacks from enemies that take a turn to charge up, overlay the targeted spots that they're going to hit in these yellow danger squares. So you gotta squint to see where the color switches are in later levels. And really, I would just always rather the levels just be flat. I won't spoil the bosses, but just be aware you're gonna have to fight them all more than once, and as you'd expect, they aren't any more fun the second time around. There's just a lot of repetition in general in this game, and the characters even pointed out how the tropes in the maps are getting stale. But then the game just keeps repeating them right after the characters say that, which is in bad taste. I did like them the first time around, though. They're all fairly distinct from each other, and they provide a unique encounter rather than just do big damage to them or they do big damage to you. Less can be more, man, and you'll hear me say that again. There's always New Game Plus for repeat content or to extend gameplay. Don't water down a great game with bloat levels and bosses. Because I think the game is great and its gameplay's great. There's just a lot of weird hiccups. But maybe it's because it's Atlus's first time in this genre and they were nervous about their game not being as long as their usual 100-hour affairs. I don't know. I do know, though, we have to talk about the Day 1 DLC that every Sega game brings these days. You've got 3 different sets for Tactica, a gun pack, a sub-persona set, and the Repaint Your Heart campaign. You can bundle all 3 together for a discount, but it is not worth it. The guns you get are only strong in the early game and quickly outpaced, and the sub-personas are just JPEGs with a passive ability or 2 that are okay, and you never see the personas fully modeled in the game. Skip the bundle in these 2 packs. If you're going to get any DLC, the Repaint Your Heart campaign is actually worth the money. It's cheaper than the overall bundle, and it includes adding Kasumi and Akechi as playable characters in the New Game Plus of the base game. Before I get into spoiler discussion with my thoughts on the DLC's story, let's talk a little bit about its gameplay mechanics and the general features, or lack thereof, as it differs from the base game. The major mechanic this DLC introduces is a Splatoon-style paint tile effect, where standing on your own paint color is good, and standing on the enemy paint color is bad. The enemies have multiple ways to spray paint, but you really only can spray it by hitting the enemy. If you play this before the base game, since it technically happens before the base game story, the paint mechanic does a good job of easing the player into understanding the cover-based gameplay that is its main feature, and allows you ways of playing around it, since the Royal Trio don't really have ways of getting enemies outside of cover. And the Royal Trio is all you will get to play as for this DLC. And for as fun as they are as characters in the story, and their interactions with each other, this wears thin on the gameplay really fast. With limited sub-persona selection in the DLC, you'll be stuck with the exact same moveset, and therefore pretty much the same approach to each mission. Joker sets them up, Akechi hits them hard, Kasumi to heal them, or to pick someone off. Rinse and repeat for every level. Combine that with the DLC missions having none of the bonus objectives from the base game missions, even though they were pretty bare bones there. And the DLC repeats several maps just to extend the length. There are several levels where it's an identical map as before, but now you start the mission surrounded and in bad positioning. I think this is probably to justify the price by padding the length, but honestly, less is more here. I would have enjoyed this better if the experience was tighter and not filled with these filler levels. Because the first time you play a map, the layout and encounters are really fun, don't get me wrong. I just don't want to do them again immediately after. Really, if you took out like 4 or 5 of the repeated maps, or reduced the Guernica repeated boss fights down from 4 whole times to like 2, this would be so solid it'd be impossible for me to not recommend it. But if you aren't bothered by that kind of thing, or maybe if you don't play them all in one sitting, like me, you'll have a blast. Visually, it's really appealing, and all the designs for the characters go so hard. It's the best aesthetic kingdom in the game by far. The music is great as always, and the characters are a lot of fun. Speaking of fun characters, let's chat about the story for a little bit. And you guys know how I am about spoilers, so it's only fair I warn you about them here. I'll timestamp the video if you want to skip over my thoughts on the Repaint Your Heart campaign, because I will discuss spoilers. So check the timeline now, bounce ahead to the next part of the review if you haven't played already so you don't get spoiled. But my spoiler-free thoughts really quick, and to give you time to tab back into this video to check the timeline, are that I like the characters, the villains, and the story. They're all pretty solid, and it gets a recommendation from me. Now, have you skipped ahead if you don't want spoilers? Okay, let's do it. I won't summarize the whole plot or anything here, but just give my overall thoughts on some key plot points. Starting with wondering why Atlas refuses to do anything post-Royal with the Royal Trio. This takes place right before Sai's Palace in Persona 5, so we're still stuck with the Detective Prince Akechi, and this is still Kasumi. This is baffling for a number of reasons. First, because Tactica's main story takes place after the events of Persona 5, so why this DLC is in the middle makes no sense, and it makes it largely unrelated to the base game. And second, it's totally fine to say Akechi is Black Mask now. We all know it. Loki and the Black Mask designs and personality are far better than Robin Hood and the Prince Akechi. Psycho Batman clears, and Akechi is amazing in the third semester. So reverting his character remains an odd choice to me, and it obviously reverts Sumire's whole character. It's really glaring when there's a whole discussion about code names and how Joker and Crow are their code names, but they just awkwardly skip over Kasumi not having one. The reason I love these characters is because of their development from their third semester, and who they grow to be. So to get the versions of these characters that haven't undergone that arc is disappointing, but I still love them anyway. And this story might focus on the Royal Trio, but Joker might as well not even be here. If he was removed, I'm not sure the plot would change at all. It's basically the Akechi and Kasumi buddy cop adventure, where Kasumi is naive and full of heart, who will risk it all to save the day, and Akechi is the jaded veteran who thinks things through and he's very cautious. Joker is here because the player is. A silent protagonist in a visual novel is such a bad idea. So the fourth wheel on this threesome gets most of the interactions, with everyone primarily talking to Luca. The story between Luca and her corrupted sister have emotional parallels to the Kasumi and Sumire relationship that would be so much more impactful if these moments were shared with Sumire, not the Kasumi personality. Regardless, it's a very tragic story that I really did feel bittersweet about. But the chibi art and her fucking furry rat costume absolutely ruined the mood this story wants to set. We see these piles of corpses and dozens of people dying. Luca's tales of them being starving orphans living on the street struggling to get by. But it's all very hard to take seriously when it's coming from her in a fursuit. Maybe it would have been a cliche at this point, but Luca having an awakening and maybe getting an animal-style Phantom Thief suit might have fit the mood better. But it all meshes together really weird tonally between the visuals we get and the emotional story itself. The story is good and heart-wrenching at times, but it's held back by these funny art choices. Luca not being a playable character either in a DLC where you only get 3 characters to use is another missed opportunity, especially when you consider Toshiro's mechanic in the base game. She could have just reused that and been fine. But no playable Tao, or Guernica as she's known when she is the villain for the majority of the game, is a much bigger miss. First of all, her design is so fucking cool that it is a crime we'll only ever see it in chibi form, and it'll be locked in DLC hell forever. Tatted up, absolutely jacked, muscle-bound graffiti artist is a base look that I would argue is one of the best in the whole franchise, not just this game. She appears as a non-controllable allied character later on in the story, who mainly creates the paint mechanic for you. You just give the player control over her to use like playable non-Persona users in base Tactica and Persona Q, and have her paint skills just be her literal art skills. Add her into New Game Plus mode like Akechi and Kasumi, and that would be so sick. This character, her design, her story arc, personality are all awesome, and I desperately want her to not be forgotten. But I fear she might, because guess what? After you defeat Jerry, who is a great final boss and a truly hateable villain, who isn't a god by the way, when the story resolves, the royal trio forget everything that happened, even though it had a real-world impact on people, and Tao remembers it. It was all a dream, and amnesia are some of my least favorite tropes, and this story and these characters deserve better than that. I really like this DLC a lot, but it is certainly flawed. Still, overall, I would recommend it to you. If you liked Tactica's gameplay and were on the fence about this DLC purchase, you should experience this. If you skipped ahead in the video to pass over the Repaint Your Heart DLC story spoilers, know that I'm about to talk about the base game story as well now. But I wanted you to at least hear this part to get to my short non-spoiler thoughts on it before you skip ahead again to the end, where I wrap up. Tactica's story has a lot of touching and heartfelt moments that make you laugh and cry like a true drama should. Moments that are told very well and feel truly meaningful, but they're completely undercut by the art style. You got chibi sprites bouncing up and down on the screen while I'm supposed to be in my feelings. It's an odd dynamic because the plot feels oppressive and demands growth from its characters, and it pays it off too. But the cute little chibi faces, I feel like I just want to be on a fun-loving adventure with them all, like they don't deserve to be here and being cruelly tortured by their oppressive fate. But here they are. You may find this review overly critical, but I think it's because these characters all mean so much to me, or my standards for things in this franchise are higher than what I would let other games get away with. But I left this game feeling good about being able to see my favorite rebels again. With that being said, let's really dive into the details and spoil the shit out of the story from here. And I want to be very clear, I am about to spoil major points in the story from here on. So check the timeline again and skip to the next timestamp to not be spoiled, because I think you should experience this game spoiler-free. All set? Here we go. Like many Persona spin-offs before it, this game is told in a visual novel format. And this is a visual novel with a silent protagonist. Joker gets a couple text boxes you can choose from for his supposed dialogue that gets completely ignored by other characters, and even then, your choices are always kind of the same thing again and again. Let's do this together. Arena, remember our deal. Or something similar. It's just hard to do the silent protag in JPEG form. Joker gets a lot of his personality from his little animations in the overworld that are missing here in the 2D world. It makes him very expressionless without them, and he's more blank slate than ever before. He has cool moments in cutscenes, but that's really the only time you'll notice Joker here. This is why a visual novel protagonist needs to speak, and not just get dialogue boxes that are occasionally funny and are vaguely picked up on in the overall discussion, so they can actively feel involved in the story. In Persona 4 Dancing and Arena, which are also both visual novels, Yunaru Kami gets to openly speak like a normal character, and I just don't understand why you wouldn't repeat that with Joker in his spin-off. Unless since the Persona 4 spin-off era, Japanese polls gave results that they hated when the protag talked, which sounds crazy to me. But you get Xander Mobus as the voice actor and you give him like 4 lines? Nothing's crazier than that to me. Social links, or confidant ranks, are gone in this game as there's no calendar system, replaced with the Persona Q or Soul Hackers 2 style hangout events, which are fine. I always love those one-on-one character connections, but I really do appreciate that a lot of time is spent in this game to show how good of friends all the thieves are with each other, and how they've grown as a group together from Persona 5 through to Tactica. And that's a nice touch, because I love this team, and I like seeing them all talk with each other in these hangouts. The titular spin-off duo, because every Persona spin-off must bring a new duo of characters at least. This time around, it's Arena and Toshiro. Coming off of Strikers, Toshiro gets done absolutely dirty compared to Zenkichi. They're both adult men joining the Phantom Thieves, but Toshiro gets to use his mask for literally a one-time use, for the weakest awakening we've seen in both performance and aesthetics. Hell, they don't even hit willpower for it. He also doesn't even get a Phantom Thief outfit or a code name. He's out here still in his suit being called Toshiro, like bro is not part of the team. And for every bit of lame that Toshiro brings, Arena's at least cool and well designed, but the half-assing of her as a Persona shadow hybrid later on in the plot is not great, and I wish they just committed to her being Toshiro's Persona and have him take Arena's party slot, and then maybe he gets a rebel outfit similar to hers visually. But I think they were too afraid to make her not playable, and gave us the weird Toshiro guest battle mechanic late game, which doesn't do much but make the levels easier, so it's not very satisfying, and I think it doesn't pay off either of them as well as they deserve. And even though Arena is around the entire game and fits in perfectly as a member of the crew, she's also robbed of getting a codename, which disappointed me. In fact, a lot of the usual tropes are gone here, which are all normally my favorite moments. The full awakening and outfit reveal, there are no calling cards for any of the bosses, no changes of heart. With Strikers keeping all this in, I was hoping to see it come around again, but maybe this is a hot take. I could watch a dozen of these if they're all built up well enough. Who knows? Maybe Persona 5X will deliver for me in the future. You know who always delivers for me though? Lavenza. She is back and is actually a fairly significant character with plot relevance, and not just the fusion menu personified. She's as cute as ever when hanging with the homies. The Velvet Train is the peak of Velvet Room experience, and I just think she's great, so I wanted to give her a shout out. Funny enough, Lavenza might now have the most screen time of any attendant with her appearances across all of her side games, which is interesting.
This place honestly feels hot.
As for the antagonists of the game, the evil fiancé does feel like it's treading on Haru's story a bit, but this time it's done a bit better as they're the ruler of the kingdom in Toshiro's mind. But they're far and away the best antagonist, and unfortunately they're tackled first. I wasn't really interested in Toshiro's daddy issues, and while the bits about Yuki were definitely the best part of the Toshiro parental arc, it does feel really weird to have those tragic flashbacks in with the cutesy chibi faces, and yet again it throws me for a loop. Nakabachi's also really boring as a villain. He's just some bad vice principal at Toshiro's school that isn't remotely interesting. And even his small throwing enemies mechanic as a boss isn't that cool, nor is his entire enemy type. Eri, who is the real-life Arena, is the most interesting part of this arc. But once she's revealed, you can almost see the script of the upcoming scene show up in the subtitle boxes if you look hard enough. It's so obvious. If they had rolled with it being obvious, that would have been fine, but the characters all kind of act surprised for some reason, which is weird, since we've seen the thieves guess the quote-unquote plot twist before with Black Mask. But Eri is well written enough outside of that, and her boss design is badass enough, that I still like her a lot, and her influence on Toshiro as a character in his development. She leaves a powerful message, in my opinion, that I've actually thought about taking to heart in my own life, about learning to say thanks instead of sorry when someone helps you, and that resonated with me, and I really liked it. Eri is also the only person who gets a moment where they are drawn like a normally proportioned human. It's almost like the team realized the crux of the story relies on people caring about this character and being able to take them seriously, which I feel validates my complaints about the art style dampening the impact of previous emotional and tragic moments of the story. As we ramp up to the end, the writers feel the need to do a whole segment of explanations and recaps of the story, which felt more unnecessary than usual. I was able to complete the whole game, all the challenges and side missions in about 30 hours. I understand needing recaps in the 100-hour mainline games, where the casual audience would need them on something they played like 3 in real life months ago. I wonder if they just did it out of habit despite this being one of the most normal length games in the whole franchise. But just in case you did forget, you have to refight all the major bosses again to really hammer it home, which makes you more indifferent to them as characters, I feel. The finale brings us to Shadow Toshiro and another fucking god plot, because the human subconscious yearns for a fucking god plot in Japanese games, I guess. I've made it clear how I feel about these in the past. I like them when the scale is massive and appropriate for them, but when it's just for like a small town, or in this case a single dude, it's a bit much. You're telling me they had to bring a whole ass god to get into Toshiro's head? Get real. No thanks. Any demon could have done that. Hell, his dad did. But The resolution it brings us to is nice. The cast thankfully remembers the plot, so everything we did wasn't in vain. And I suppose the twist is that Toshiro has a change of heart in a similar vein to Sai. There are a lot of touching moments and really good closure for Toshiro and Eri that, despite my thoughts on their whole arc as characters, their ending is pretty satisfying and heartwarming, which is how I feel after playing this. There we have it, everyone. My review of Persona 5 Tactica. It went on a little bit longer than I expected, but I'm just really passionate about this series and it's been a big part of my life. If you skipped the story spoiler section of the video, just know that basically I liked it, and I recommend that you get yourself a copy. It's on Game Pass, and most places are selling it for like 50% off now, so it's pretty reasonably priced. As always, I'm constantly tweaking how I do these videos and the different format and structures of them, so this one felt a little bit more structured than previous ones, but I felt it let me kind of go off a little bit more on the different categories because I had a thought process in mind when I was tackling each section. So I'd love to hear your feedback. Of course, you can leave it in the comments below, as always. And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on my Persona 3 Reload streams. Those will be coming up soon. And of course, drop a like, hang out with me on Discord. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And I'll be sure to see you guys in the next one. Bye!